Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Deputy Chris Blin of the States of Guernsey. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. And it's all been happening down in Guernsey, which we'll get into a little bit later on in the interview, I think. But first of all, you've been in the headlines a little bit lately with such things as unexploded bombs and ETA travel documents. Let's start off with the bombs. How did they come to be noticed?
Right. Well, it was brought to my attention. Actually, it was brought to social media attention by a gentleman called Ben Remfrey, who's actually a Guernseyman. He's been awarded, his MBE. He's done a lot of work in Ukraine, disposing of weapons, bombs, and mines. So he's an ex-military
Yeah.
who works specifically in this area. Um, the What brought it to his attention initially was the fact that he was aware from previous conversations going back to 2019 that there were some bombs dropped here in 1941. And what brought it to light was that recently in Japan, a bomb exploded of a similar type and size. So he brought this out. There was a response from the government saying that this had been looked into in 2019 and that a report had been done. But he was challenging that report.
Yeah.
And because this is, a very serious matter, I got behind him, and there were a group of other deputies. There were probably about 8 or 9 other deputies and Home Affairs and the officers and the just retired chief of police met up. So the last meeting, after the initial work that we had done, after the group of deputies connected, and after the meeting with Home Affairs, the police. So that's where it's at now. I do need to
Yeah.
follow up with Mr. Remfrey and with the authorities on
These were
this.
German bombs, yeah?
Right. Well, this is what's really interesting, Tony. So what I like about a good research is the fact that actually there's a possibility it could be a German bomb,
Yeah.
and there's a likelihood it's more likely to have been a British bomb because there are two. The area is not arguable. It is where it is, which is the area of Route Isabel. So the predominant story, let's say, is that it was a Wellington bomber
Yeah.
um, dropping 4 bombs, not to harm or to destroy any German emplacement, but 4 bombs because with the type of pistols they use, they can't return to base with them. You can't land a bomber fully laden.
Yeah. This was common
Now,
practice.
they have
Yeah.
various areas. Correct, yes. So they have various areas where they need to dispose of the ordnance, and it was meant to be herds deep, which is significantly
Yes.
far away from here. This is flying by stars, night navigation.
Yeah.
So the 4 bombs fell here. One exploded because it landed on hard ground, and the other 3 basically buried themselves in. And there are documents supporting that, showing the locations, showing the approximate locations, because it was after it would be the Germans who would have to kind of work around the areas to fill them, etc. So there's a number of good there's a number of documents from the Germans, for example, who had to kind of make safe and put right. And the other theory or story, which coincided around the same time, was a German bomber returning to land on a Guernsey runway, or needing to land on a Guernsey runway,
Mm.
and had to drop the bomb before. Now, if it's the German bomber, they'll be half the size,
Yeah.
but actually more potentially dangerous than the British bombs, which were the kind of general bombs, which would have been larger but not as much destructive capacity. So we're there, and I made it very clear this wasn't about scaremongering or panicking. It's basically we need to go back and and look at that part. Now, the MOD did come out with a statement at the time, and the States of Guernsey and Home Affairs came up with a statement saying that they concur that information was done. Mr. Remfry believes that the bombs are substantially deeper than was thought at the time. And that's where the issue is. What we don't want to have is anything kind of going wrong. And there's technology to investigate.
Yeah. So get the British government to provide the bomb disposal buoys if necessary.
That should be, in my opinion, that would be the action to consider. I believe Mr. Remfry is looking at other ways, and there's been a bit of a gap, to be fair. And I always get very nervous if the gaps go on for too long, because very often we can have situations where they just left. So we've opened the doors. We should finish the investigation. This does not mean whole areas closed down. There might be evacuation for the surveys, and the surveys even talking and finding out about what they need. It's a series of in effect piles where they investigate into the ground and using technology, and then keep moving forward until they identify what it is they're seeking, and then after that there's another decision what to do.
Yeah, okay. Let's get on to the ETA travel documents, which it just doesn't affect Guernsey, does it? I think the whole thing's going to change in 2025. But how does it affect Guernsey in terms of getting French visitors over? Because they're pretty important people, aren't they, to get over and spend some money and everything else?
Yeah, well, look, Tony, 100%. So if anyone's ever been off to the United States, you'll know that you have to fill out an ESTA, and it can last, several years, etc. Yeah. So it's a similar process.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible to do, but it takes time and it takes money. But what it stops is the ability to just come over. Now, the statistics, and I don't have them to hand, but the stats, but everyone knows the stats for French day trippers coming over is a considerable one.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is because of our amazing heritage of having Victor Hugo lived here for 40 years.
Yeah.
And now we have talk about building a Victor Hugo Center. I take, that's still a while away, but we already have really large numbers of people and school groups and day trippers and yachties and sailors and visitors, who come over to do that. So we're going to decimate that number because they won't be able to just organize a school group and come over. Everything will have to be planned. Now, when you look at other places like Ireland, yes, we're not the same, but they do have the Southern Ireland, Northern Ireland. So they have the sort of Schengen visa on one side, and they have the CTA, Common Travel Area.
Yeah.
So they're able to do it. Gibraltar are looking at doing it. And what I find ironic here is I have a frustration that given that we have such a huge heritage with Normandy and Brittany and a history with them. I mean, what do we call our king?
Duke of Normandy.
Duke of Normandy.
What did we call it? The late Queen, Duke of Normandy.
That's right, yes. Yeah. Notre Duke. So we've always had that. So we should really be working on that aspect. Now, I know a member of my sort of colleagues on Jersey, they have a similar opinion.
Yeah.
Now, I understand the position of government saying that, we have to stay in line with the common travel area, because otherwise there'll be consequences. And I know that there's an immediate direct impact, for example, on population management, which we know is kind of connected. So the damage that we will do, and if I kind of extrapolate this to things like cruise ships, we're already having reduced numbers of cruise ships.
Yeah.
But now the cruise ships are going to have to make a decision. Do they want to come into an ETA port? Because you can't just sign up while you're on the cruise. They're going to have to make fundamental decisions about whether or not they come here. And then we have the French yachties, coming over, and the visitors coming over. So although I'm only kind of looking at mainly France, but France is hugely important for all of the Channel Islands, for Alderney, for Guernsey,
Yeah.
for Jersey, and the rest of the bailiwick.
Chris, you haven't got much time to sort this out, or have you? Because we've been going down to Spain regularly to visit the family, and they keep sort of putting it off in terms of going from um, stamp the passport situation to going through e-gates. Have you got some time, do you think?
The main thing will be if there is any movement within Jersey and Guernsey to be willing to at least try. We've had a change of government in the UK.
Mm.
We should be pushing for this. Now, I have asked questions, and very often the questions come back. We've looked into this, we're looking into this, but there are other conditions. But no one, the UK government is not going to refund us for the loss of trade. It's already hard enough with all the things going on that the Channel Islands have gone through. Let's say since Brexit, there's so much impact. So I would just love us to see us working closer together to actually stand up for the identity, for that identity with France that we've had for hundreds or thousands of years, which now, well, thousands may be exaggerated, but this
good thousand,
historical
a good thousand,
yes, a good thousand. Yeah.
Oh, right, that's interesting. You also wanted to talk about population management. What do you mean by that in terms of newcomers coming permanently to live on the island, or transient people, or what?
Right. So this one, I mean, I've got a lot of experience in this because in my sort of work area besides, I work an awful lot with this sector. So the clearest way I will explain this, for your listeners and for us, is to say that we had in place, the population management, which used to have a short-term license, which was like 1 year, but it could be repeated 5 times. Then we had what they call the MTEP, a medium-term employment permit. That was 5 years. Now, with a 5-year one, it was only for 5 years, and you could bring your dependents. It was usually middle senior professionals in industry, etc. And then you have the LTEP, which is the long-term employment permit, and that's the one which is basically, well, let's say in old currency, we used to call it the 15-year license.
Yeah.
So that LTEP is the kind of the beginning of the long term, and that LTEP also means, so that's usually, you have your seniors, your doctors, your specialists, your teachers, etc., who are going to kind of make a permanent base here. Now, when we removed the 5-year MTEP, this, in my opinion, is where I am of the opinion we've made a big error, because by removing that 5-year, we had to reduce the step from 5 years individual down to 3 years. Now, I've had the conversations, and it's been clearly explained that there's a feeling of that if we kept the MTEP, with the UK government and the CTA, we would be in a position where there would be a risk that some people could kind of stay through and connect on, and it would be damaging our relationship, which no one wants to have.
Yeah.
However, by removing that MTEP, and therefore the jump goes from the 3-year, as in 1 year permits, where, by the way, you have no dependence over or anything, and then jumping straight away to the LTEP for those people where there's a big kind of gap because of the 5-year MTEPs. So a lot more receive them, which means as soon as they receive them, they have the ability to kind of almost reach the permanent status, where before it was the privilege and the responsibility of an employer to get to a point to give that to the individual, whereas now it's a right. They get that. And what does that mean, Tony? They can bring dependents. They can place their children in our brilliant state schools, Les Varandes, at the cost of the taxpayer.
Yeah.
They can bring other dependents, as long as it's following a rule of direct. But direct means that we end up in a situation, and the best term I can use is that they're kind of they're not net fiscal contributors, because we all agree we need people from all over the world to help us get through. But there has to be, the term I'll use was that there needs to be a net fiscality. They have to at least cover their costs or bring towards what they're doing. But we're starting to see a real change. The cost of the salary of the individual, what they're doing, superseded by the cost of all the other factors. And to be honest, that includes income support, because that isn't part of social, that's not part of the benefits. That is something if required. So it puts us in a tough situation.
And there have been instances where if they do the 15-year route, they can get onto the local market in terms of property purchase. Is that right?
Well, no. If you're on the, well, let's call it the new term is the LTEP, the 8 year.
Yeah.
If you're on that, you have that option already.
Yeah.
Now that's absolutely brilliant. If we have people who have, I don't know, leaders of some industries or these really essential workers in HSC or education, and we want them to immediately purchase a house and do all the things there. But that's not the category that concerns me. It's the category of the catch-all area between the 5 and the 8, which affects, it could be in hospitality, it could be, in more general areas where they may not necessarily be kind of contributing as much back as to what their job is. And I don't mean by a small amount, I mean by very large amounts. Yeah. Just take the cost of putting one child in a school, if it's paid for by the States of Guernsey, 12,000, 13,000 pounds each, against maybe if they're on a 25, 26,000 salary, because it's not based on how big it is, it's based on complying with the LTEP. It could be as low as 28,000 pounds, which will be generating 2, 3, 4,000 tax.
Yeah, so I mean, it's certainly something that needs consideration. Let's move on to last week, because you were a bit of a busy chap last week, weren't you? Tell me this, Chris. How can you establish what a financial deficit is when you've got all these outstanding tax returns for the last 2 or 3 years, and you don't know how much money you're actually going to pull in way of taxation to offset the deficit? I'm at a loss.
Okay, well, I'm sad to say that I have the same feeling, because we have loads of different ways of interpreting through IPSAS, or the different ways of looking at the accounting and the reporting. But let's kind of simplify it. Let's bring it back to the fact that we've agreed the budget, and that I think was around 650 million is going to be for the next for 25, a substantial increase. We've all been told by various P&Rs, as in the previous P&R under Peter Fairbrush and the new P&R under Lyndon Trott, of the deficits available, which kind of vary, but the average sort of number they were sort of being sort of reported is up to the 100 million. Now, if we have now agreed and approved a budget for an amount where we don't have sufficient money to cover as the income, we're in this very difficult situation that we're going to be led to have cuts in other areas. Now, I, for one, amongst other colleagues, there was a really interesting amendment by Deputy Hellier, a very serious, divisive for the Assembly, but saying that we have to make serious cuts. And then there was another amendment which I did second under Deputy Dyke, which was to do with freezing the government services, the CS civil service, where it is.
Yeah.
So freeze it. So it's not kind of cutting it, but it's not allowing it to go any further. And then there were other interesting ones. Deputy Leadbeater spoke about, when we were asking about an additional 650,000 for maintenance of states housing, and he explained the inefficiencies, the waste of money, the all the things there, and so convincingly that the whole Assembly voted against the increment there. Although I declare that Peter Roffey, president of ESS, he was still protecting and standing by the way they do things, which is what you'd have to do, I suppose, as the leader, as the president of the committee. But we still have areas, and Guernsey has, is it 4 times or 3 times that the Guernsey people have said they do not want a GST. The States Assembly made it very clear there are only 10 votes in favour of the 2%, as in the 10% tax rise, 22% total. So that failed. Now, interestingly enough, if I had more, and if the island had more sort of understanding or faith that we're doing everything possible to look at how we can look at services and costs, etc., I actually think there would have been more support for the short-term interim tax rise. Because isn't it bizarre? We've passed the budget, we didn't do the 2%, and we did do the GST, which won't come in until 2027.
If you're lucky.
And then yeah, that's right.
Because I mean, the thing is not going to be smooth, is it? It's not going to be that easy to sort out. Yeah. It's going to, I think you're probably talking in terms of 5 years. If you've got the wagon rolling now, it'd take you 5 years to actually get the systems and everything else sorted to actually effectively collect it.
Yeah, and you said yourself, I mean, we haven't collected all the tax revenues.
Yeah.
So if we haven't been able to do that, then how on earth are we going to get that? And the cost. Now, other jurisdictions have it, so I agree with that. And again, I am not 100% opposed to it. I'm opposed to the fact that it's going to create, if we haven't even pushed, and when you do push to say, why don't we get the resources? Why don't we collect the tax monies we're owed? Why don't we work on that?
Yeah.
The answer is we don't have the resources. So if we don't have the resources for something we are owed, how on earth are we going to get the resources together?
But that's the point, Chris.
Something,
what is the most what is the most the department that you really need to work well? It's the most important department, and that's Guernsey Revenue Services, because everything else flows from that, and there doesn't seem to be any attempt anywhere to do that. Let's continue with this in terms of the fact that a lot of people say the civil service is bloated, and also I think they still get they're on a salary scale which goes up every year automatically. And they get a cost of living on top of that. Surely in this day and age, that's not right.
Look, so this was very much one of the topics. Again, it was one of the amendments specifically saying from January 2025 to bring people in without the increments. Now, as you can imagine, during the debate, the unions were directly approaching, and they were saying things like, well, if you do that, then every person starting, we will immediately start them on the highest increment, and there can be up to 3 increments in a job banding. Now, in the commercial sector, if I was coming to work for you, Tony, and I was going to be your accountant, you would give me the salary I'm going to have. You're not going to say to me, I tell you what I'll do, Chris, I will pay you this much this year and I'll increase it next year automatically. And then again, it should be done on, if I've had an impact and beneficial for your company, there should be a judgment, a decision, and it could be based on performance. It could be based on success of the organization. There are other factors. But what's clear is that, you have your group of deputies, and then you have your civil service, and then it's the public sector. So the approach of public sector pay comes under this system.
Yeah.
But if we are now in considerable trouble, we have to look at that.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
And we have more people heading towards working in the civil service than we have in the private sector. Yeah. And it's the private sector that generates most of our income. are, you know.
We're seeing it in the UK, of course, at the moment with the present government, but you probably won't want to comment on that. But, there's also the other elephant in the room, Chris, the pension scheme, the staff pension scheme, thought to be £1 billion in deficit. 1 billion. You know,
Yeah, so this is
it's
between the DB and the DC.
yeah,
It's changed now, but we're talking of the historical
yeah.
work, and it's kind of I know that in the past, and even before I was as a states member, there was already talk about that should have been changed. Now
Mm,
I can get it that going back, let's say 20 plus years. And especially when we look at Guernsey, the finance sector was
mm.
the be all and the end all. It was really hard to get people to come and work in the civil service when they didn't get the perks and the bonuses and everything there. So I can see what's happened, but then we come out the other side, and then the changes happened. So in that same way, we looked at it, and we're going back years when they were trying to find ways to make it appealing to remain
Mm.
as a civil servant. We need to kind of balance that out, because we should cut our cloth accordingly. And this has been said by many people. So it's not a single voice here, but we need to adjust to
Yeah,
how we do things
yeah.
and how we look at innovation, savings, efficiencies there. And I know everyone will say it's been done, but just the speech by Deputy Leadbeater talking about social housing maintenance, and I could name 5, 6, 7 more topics in that area.
Chris, the other elephant you've got in the room is the Alderney breakwater. Now, you'll recall that they took that on whilst Jersey was fairly cute in terms of saying, right, we'll provide a fishery protection vessel. And the maintenance is an annual event. But I was speaking to somebody recently who knows a bit about these things. He said that you're not spending anywhere near enough to maintain that breakwater. And he felt that the expenditure should be about twice. The budget should be about twice what's going in at the moment. So, once again, this is conveniently brushed under the carpet with a lot of people, isn't it?
I mean, to be very honest, Tony, I'm not fully aware about the work on the breakwater
Mm.
there. All I can say generically is the States of Guernsey per se has not been great on the maintenance of hardly any of its infrastructure, and hence we are in this mess that we are. And that's because when we had monies and things, we didn't keep on the programs,
Yeah.
and now it's kind of compounded it,
They've come
sort of
home to
exponentially
roost.
at this point.
They've
Yeah.
come home to roost. Can I give you a tip? Never take on a breakwater without doing a survey.
Right.
Presumably, because of the emergency budget, the Alderney runway's gone to the bottom of the list. So we wonder what's going to happen there.
Yeah, well,
But
I don't think it's at the bottom of the list. I just think it's placed with a lot of other
yeah,
high costs, high ticket costs, such as the hospital, the schools, etc. So
mm,
we are really in this tricky one. I mean, you kindly invited me on your show, previously, and we had the conversations about the Alderney runway. Now, it's really hard because I am, in spite of maybe some Alderney representatives don't believe so, but I am very much a supporter and I believe in Alderney. But again, I believe in cutting the cloth
yeah, sure,
accordingly.
yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah,
when we spent those years going through, waiting for the prices to come in, and if it came in at 24 million, we would have had that runway. Well, given the fact that I'm very interested in EMAS in Guernsey and other aspects of aviation, it was a simple calculation to work out that it was never ever going to happen, and yet instead of working together to look at what else can be done
yeah,
or just get the
yeah,
runway itself
yes, yeah,
sorted,
yeah,
we lost 2 3 years, and
yeah,
this has happened on tax. This has happened on Northern Runway. We need to rather than politically position ourselves to wait for a certain thing to happen. if it's clear it's not going to happen, there is no harm in trying to find alternatives.
Yeah, of
I
course.
believe Alderney runway needs that being fixed,
Most of
and
the
that's what
public,
should be
yeah,
first.
most of the public on Alderney never saw that grandiose scheme as being viable. So if the
Yeah,
public aren't stupid, why are the politicians?
yeah. And but the thing is, I don't think the politicians were. They were. Well, there maybe some believed it was going to come out, but I mean, any conversation I've had with anyone, do you really think, given the fact that you say they're putting a bit of additional runway on Guernsey,
Yeah,
um, some people say it will cost 18, and everyone says it'll cost 70. You're going to build a full Sim City airport for 24 million. You'd be lucky to get change from the runway sections and that's excluding all of the other areas. But I
asphalt
must
extra.
admit, yeah, and then I also sort of think, there must be alternatives. I've spoken to these. There was a group of consultants who approached the States, and there were
Mm,
a different group. They were from New Zealand, and they were saying that there are some regional airports, which is in effect, sort of
yeah,
subscale. So could be Alderney, where, for example, they don't even use the control towers in the same way with staff. They use the technology, and
yes,
this happens, by the way, a very inexperienced aviator, but having flown to France and things, private flying, you go into control zones,
yeah,
and there was talk there. If we have the right spirit and the right view, rather than kind of fighting on the 1948 agreement, and so often during the debate, it was like,
mm,
well, then we'll have to redo the 1948 agreement.
mm,
My answer was, well, then what we should be doing is let's find the solutions with what we've got and make it work. But even if it had come in at 24 million, which it would never have done, even the air crew and pilots didn't see
no, that's right,
the
that's right.
possibilities.
Everybody and his dog,
Yeah,
crazy,
everybody. Yeah.
crazy.
Um, yeah.
Let's keep on the transport bit because I know you've got a few things to say about Condor, British Ferries, and Jersey's response. How can you have a situation where you're supposed to be working in partnership and it all falls to pieces because somebody in Jersey goes and presses a wrong button on a computer, and you then find that you have to go ahead on your own, and it looks as if DFDS might still service Jersey. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? We got past the Cavaliers and Roundheads, haven't we?
So I mean, let's start with the famous button pressing
Yeah, incident.
Richards.
Yeah,
Yeah, and now look, I try to look at things pragmatically and normally. I mean, yes, he pressed that, and because he was the most senior civil servant on the island on Jersey, and who was leading on that
yeah,
project, in my opinion, that's a daft thing to do. But it was also because I understand that he wanted to find out, to get to the statistics, you have to press a
mm,
button. So
mm,
he pressed a button. Maybe it was his opinion, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was just to get to the number. But is that enough to take away an individual who'd worked very hard on that project
of
for
course not.
nearly a year?
Of course not.
Um, it's harsh, right?
Yeah,
But it's politics. I mean, sort of you can recuse yourself for sort of minor incidents, and I know it could be critical. Someone could be very critical to me. Maybe it's not a minor incident, but come on, it was clicking a button on a Facebook with a view, and so what? But as long as he's doing his job professionally, which they're
mm,
doing,
mm.
to analyze the tenders and the process there, so I do kind of wonder sometimes. I mean, if we had that situation at work about, we're being bought by another company and we asked the staff to choose and they did the wrong thing there, is that it?
No,
Does that
of
bring?
course
But
it
if
isn't. Of course it
anything is
isn't. Yeah,
used,
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, how do you see it going forward?
And
I mean,
then,
they want Condor to extend by so many months the existing contract. Condor have sort of said, well, why
yes,
should
so that
we?
was interesting. Yeah, so because that means, so the contract, I believe, finishes in March 2025.
Yeah, they
So
wanted
that
another
means
7
it
months, was it?
runs to the end. So then the extension, that's right, 7 months from there
Yeah,
will bring them to the end of the season.
yeah,
So on the one hand, you could say, well, actually, everyone's clambering for new dates and everything there.
Mm.
So now that at least they can give them out while a bigger decision is made. Because, pragmatically, you'd have thought Jersey and Guernsey have to have the same
Yeah.
supply. It's
Mm.
economies of scale.
Mm.
It's otherwise we're subscale islands working together. We're more efficient.
Crazy.
So if I kind of take this, and again, my thought process is if they are unsure, because I do have my questions. I mean, I've heard rumours that there's been more requests for funding, which I'll,
Mm.
I don't want to kind of say anything until I find out, but I'd like to find out
Yeah.
if those stories are true. I do know for a fact that we did give some funding of 3 million, both Guernsey and Jersey, so 6 million.
Yeah.
You have probably heard recently, because it came out and it was put in the news, so it's not behind the scenes, but that we're paying between anything from 300 to 700,000 pounds a month.
Yeah.
For contingency vessels. Now, it does sound like a very disparate range, but apparently it depends on the vessel, the fuel loads, the positioning, and all the things there. And that's been as a contingency plan for Condor.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I find all of this very concerning. And, and this will be very harsh, Tony, but I look at it like if there are potential question marks over the financial viability of Condor, and we put money on it, haven't we? We've put the
That's right.
26 million
That's right.
on through the loan. Well,
Yeah.
sorry, it's a company there.
Yeah.
We put
Yeah.
the 6 million in. We read again, and then we've paid the hundreds of thousands a month, which has now reached the millions, and we doubled up again. And now we're saying, I tell you what, let's go for broke. Let's double up again and go for the 15-year contract. Okay, so a little bit harsh sounding, but again, I look at it from a sort of a pragmatic financial point, and then of course I can
which is why you should.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Brittany Ferries comes along, buys 51%. You ask anyone, Tony, how big is Brittany Ferries? Do you know how big it is?
Not that big, is it?
No, it's not that big. And people seem to think, I asked 20, 30 people just to make sure I'm not getting confused on this. And it's basically 11 ships, a turnover of 400 million euros a year. The profits are 22 million euros per year. And I did read something just in the last 48 hours saying that they've made a loss this year of 1 point something.
Crazy. Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've run out of time.
Oh,
I've got a whole load of questions to ask you in the new year.
Right.
Are you standing?
Tony, I'm very sorry.
No, don't worry. Are you going to stand again?
I would love to stand again because I still have this utmost belief in our wind farm and the opportunities which will help us. But
and we've got to talk about that in the future. Chris, absolute pleasure as usual. Many, many thanks for your time. Take care.
Thanks for having me.